What is up, everyone? This is Weiss Schwarz here, and today I'm going to be bringing you a deck profile of what is quite possibly my favorite casual deck to play right now. I've affectionately decided to call this deck Oops All Zeros, even though you need a couple level 1s, but don't worry, it is absolutely necessary to the deck. This is also a very aggressive deck, which I definitely enjoy doing. I enjoy slamming characters, I enjoy slamming 2 souls, and this deck just so happens to play 8 of them. So getting right into the deck, this is the full deck profile. If you just want to copy it, click off, and go have fun, feel free to do so, but I will be taking a deeper dive into how this deck functions here in just a minute. So as you can see with the list, it is all zeros minus the 3. With this, it is really hard to explain what the deck does going from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then 3 to finishing. So I will instead be looking at each card as they function within the game plan of the deck. And that game plan to start with is this combo right here. So the Illya, which is only available in the first Fate Stay Night set, which means this is a Japanese list. But it's a casual deck. You can mix the languages. No one's going to care. So this Illya gives Hand Encore to all of your characters in front of it. And more specifically, it doesn't care the trait of the character that is giving Hand Encore, and it doesn't care what trait is being discarded for the Encore. It gives all characters, period, in front of it Hand Encore. And it gives them Hand Encore that only needs to discard a character. So you're not juggling traits in this deck or anything. It also has a Climax combo with an old stock soul, but we don't play that because it's bad, so don't worry about that. Now, the caster is a Shimikai clone, which means it gives one of your characters 500 power times the number of Master Servant characters. Traits can come up on that one, but usually won't. But the effect you really care about on this caster is its second effect that says, whenever it gets reversed in battle, you reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a level 0 or lower character, you add that card directly to your hand. You don't have to discard after that. It just gets added straight to your hand as a plus. So with this, you can put the caster in front of the Illya, and then if your deck is almost entirely made of level 0 characters, as this one is, the caster will almost always hit that top check. So you can crash in the caster, reveal the top card, it gets added to your hand, and then you can use that character to immediately encore the caster, so that whenever it dies on defense, because it's a 500 power character, so of course it's going to die if they ever front end to it, it'll check the top again, you'll add the card again, and you can discard it to keep it around. So this is pseudo infinite value with this character, which means you can actually just stop clocking very early with this deck. So you usually end up taking a lot less damage because you're only clocking maybe 2, maybe even 3 times in an entire game, as the casters that you put in front of the Illya are just never going to go away. So moving on here, we have some consistency tools. So 4 Drop Search, 3 Brainstorm, 2 of this Salvage Ricky, and then 4 of the Illya Azusa. These are all just generic good cards for any deck, but they really help us find the combo, because the Illya and caster are both master, which means they can both be added off of the Illya Azusa, and it also means that the Drop Search can search for whatever piece you are missing. Brainstorm's just good. It's a little unfortunate that we don't have any way of playing bars in this deck, but there's a reason the deck is 8-2 soul beyond just being memes, and I'll get into that later, but what we care about it is it's a plussing Brainstorm at level 0 that doesn't care about the trait that it's adding. Only playing 2 Ricky in this, you don't really want to mull away your combo pieces for the Illya and caster, but sometimes you want to recur something and it'll come in handy there, or sometimes it helps enable a Trifield if you have a Climax flooded hand. There we go. And it also just builds stock. It's free clean stock if your opponent ever cancels during its battle, which I would never say no to. So advantage in this deck. Since this is a Japanese deck, we are unable to play the, I believe it's called Steel to fight alongside Shiro from UBW, as we are on the Azusa choice. With that, JP List does have access to the original Avenger. So if you have some number of masters on field, it becomes a Shiro and a master on field, even though it's just a servant. And then it has the same encore assist effect that the Shiro does from UBW, where all of your master trait characters gain clock encore. That's not going to be everything in your deck, but it's going to be enough things, and it's really just there more for 1, yellow fixing, and 2, early advantage before you can get your Illya online. Because caster, also being a master, means you can also clock encore the card. Hand encoring it after flipping zeros is obviously going to be way, way better, but if you absolutely need to, you do have the option of clock encoring it if this Avenger is on field. So, keeping with this, we don't have to play a level 1 combo, as Fate actually has quite possibly one of the best level 0 and 2 soul combos in this Shiro. So, this Shiro has pay 1 whenever its damage is canceled to draw a card. That is not tied to its climax combo, so if you ever trigger a 2 soul and end up dealing more damage than your opponent will take, so say you swing for 1 and then oops, you're swinging for 3 and they cancel on 3, you can pay out that climax immediately and then draw a card. Or just like in general, if you're ever low on hand for whatever reason, you can pay 1 to draw with it. But it also has on attack with a 2 soul. If you have 5 or less stock, you look at 3 and then add a master or servant. So I believe there's only 1 card in this deck where you can't add it, but really it's going to be any card you really care about in the deck. So it's a moderately selective plussing level 0 combo that's taking the place of what would normally be a level 1 combo in a deck. It can help you find your caster. It can help you find the Illya, really just anything. And it gets extra cards in your hand. And even if you don't have the 2 soul that it combos with, the pay 1 to draw a card on cancel still is advantage. And you definitely want that in a game of Weiss, so you have more. So this next section I have decided to call removal, because sometimes you just need something off of the board, and these are the cards to do that job. So the Shiro can deal with any kind of problematic on-death characters. Just a generally good thing to be doing is if your opponent has any card that's going to give them value on death, you want to kill it with the Shiro to make sure that they don't get that on-death trigger. And then this Rin. This Rin, I wish didn't have its first effect, which is to look at the top card of your deck and then keep it there or put it in the waiting room. If it didn't have that effect, it'd be a little bit bigger, which is what I want, because the next effect is whenever its damage is not canceled, it gains 6,000 power. So as long as you are sticking its attack, it attacks as a 6/5 for basically no cost. So if you have a full field of master servants and you have 2 casters in your front, 2 of the front lanes, and then a Ren in the last lane, the Ren can actually contest some level 3s, assuming that they don't cancel, because it'll end up attacking as a 10/5. So this is actually our one and only way to deal with any kind of problematic level 1 characters, which is usually what ends up happening. But it can also deal with some level 2s and occasionally the small level 3, because you don't get profitable side attacks on level 3s, so you really want those away, but they're usually too big to kill. But it's a good thing to keep in mind that if you're ever swinging for 1, you can make the assumption that you're going to stick the damage, and it'll attack as a 6/5 or an 8/5 or a 10/5 or whatever you end up needing it to be with the power that the caster spreads. The caster can also pump up any other character just to get over smaller level 1s or bigger level 0s. And since it sticks around forever, you can rely on having that 1500 to 2k pump, depending on what's on your stage. So moving on, our finisher. So this is actually the most recent addition to the deck. So I was really torn for a long time on what to use as the quote-unquote finisher for this deck. And for a while, the iteration of this deck that I had played the UBW one, or sorry, not the UBW, the Fate Stay Night first set, and it played the Rin and Archer 2-soul level 3 climax, and I just played 3 copies of those. But I got really tired of whiffing that. I got tired of whiffing my casters, so I just decided to play this card, which says anytime you play a yellow climax into your climax area, you can pay 2 to heal 1. It's very, very small value, but I would much rather have 1, the extra yellow fixing, and 2, just something to do with the stock that this deck makes. This deck actually ends up making a lot of stock as all of its stuff is costless. So this gives you something to do with all of that, and the incidental healing is never that bad. And I have had a couple games where I'll have 2 of these on the field, and I'll just pay 4 to heal twice, which is usually what you pay for a heal anyway, so moving on. The single text. So these are all cards that I have put exactly 1 of in the list. So first up, we have the Saber Altar. So this says whenever it comes into play, you can clock yourself from hand, and then look at X cards and keep any one of them where X is equal to your Master or Servant characters. So usually this is just digging for another 2-soul, but in emergency scenarios, it can dig for either your caster or your Illya. But like I said, usually you're just going to be digging for another 2-soul to slam down your opponent's throat with it. And I kind of just treat it as an extra 2-soul in the deck. So 9 2-souls almost. You just can't cancel with one of them. Next up, we have this level 0 Rin. It has the same on-play effect as the attacking Rin that I talked about earlier. It's a little bit more relevant here as it helps you hit its second effect more often, which is a spammable salvage brainstorm. This brainstorm is not restricted to trait, which means it can grab anything and it can be used repeatedly for 1 stock, just so long as anytime you hit, you also discard that same number of cards. This can help us in a pinch either pay out stock if we trigger too many climaxes, and it can help us get to a refresh quicker, which this deck definitely struggles with sometimes, but ideally your opponent is taking enough damage that it doesn't matter that you're not that compressed. So next up we have the Bazett. So this card should absolutely not be in the deck. This card is so bad that I cannot advise anybody to ever actually play this card, but I do because it's really funny. So the Bazett says, if you play it on turn 1, going first, you can attack twice. You get to completely ignore one of the rules of Weiss Schwarz, and you can attack twice going first. The downside is where it gets spicy, though. So whenever this card becomes reversed, it deals 2 damage to you. Thankfully, it's not just put the top 2 cards of your deck into your clock, and it is deal 2 damage. You are able to cancel the damage that it deals to you, but 2's probably low enough number that it's going to stick, and it's going to sting. So, like I said, this deck should definitely not be, this card should not be in the deck. It's so bad, but it is so funny to me to just going first, clock a yellow card, play the Bazett, play Shiro combo, play a 2-soul. My opponent starts at level 1, and I'm barely even down cards. This card, more often than not, ends up being the card that I clock or the card that I discard to a drop search, because it dealing 2 damage to you is just detrimental. You effectively give your opponent a 4th attack if this is ever on the field, which is just not something you want to be doing ever. But it's funny, so it's in the deck. And then lastly, far less exciting, is this Kirei and Illya. This card, unlike the Bazett, is meant for going second. So this card allows you to pay 2 and return it to your hand to return another character at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase. It is a really good tri-field enabler and can randomly deny reverse combos if your opponent either just doesn't read or doesn't have enough characters to field to ensure that they are killing the third lane. And you don't even care too much about the 2 stock, as since all of your stuff is costless, you will be building up quite a bit of stock in this deck. And I believe that is it. Yep, that is the end of this deck tech. If anybody has any questions or comments or suggestions about this deck, feel free to comment down below or just DM me on Twitter. I am on Twitter now, and I need that Twitter clout. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. I hope everyone has a wonderful time playing this deck. Goodbye.